All right, cowboys and cowgirls, welcome to the newest installment of the Sports Card Cowboys. I'm your host, David from Signed and Slabbed, aka the Waco Razor, and my trusty cohort, the Professor, aka the Hobby Naysayer.
Ephus pitch. How you guys doing? I'm looking forward to this day. How long has it been? 2 weeks since we.
It's been a couple weeks,
Yeah.
The professor's got a real job that he likes to blame
Stop.
stuff on. And then, he's got this assortment of children that can't seem to go to bed on time, can't
No,
keep their clothes on in public. I mean, all
no.
kinds of
That's a whole
issues
assortment of situations.
with this guy. And we should add right now. I don't know what you're drinking. You can put your plug in, but unofficially sponsored tonight by Four Roses Small Batch Bourbon. This is the bourbon for collectors.
I like that. I'm drinking some Monkey 47 gin from Germany
Okay.
and tonic with a nice slice of lime.
All right. And how's the inflation hitting you in the lime market these days?
Pretty brutal, all
Yeah.
things considered. Yeah.
They're down to 2 for a dollar when it used to be 8 for a dollar.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right on. Well, look, we're going to jump right into it tonight because we have ground to cover after being off for a week. And tonight's hot topics, the main topic is going to be, is the hobby healthy? Had a lot of things going on recently. We got a lot of questions about the economic health of the hobby. The professor and I have some very specific questions about the mental health of a number of people in the hobby. We may talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And we also coming into really what the hobby considers the biggest week of the year. The national starts officially in 3 days on Wednesday. So the countdown is on. The collection of characters will be migrating their way towards Atlantic City this week. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end as well.
For sure.
So anything else you want to cover? I think that's going to be.
No, I think that's really it. I mean, there's a whole host of things that kind of fall out of the health commentary, which I'm sure we'll address. And as someone, as I now understand, that's been to close to 10 nationals, I'm looking forward to asking you a few questions about, from a novice's perspective around the things that you're looking forward to and just kind of your frame of mind heading into next week, which I wish I could be there with you. I think we'd have a lot of fun, but hopefully next year we can make it happen. So with that, let's get into it.
All right. So, look, so tonight's main topic. Oh, well, actually, I'll add one more thing. I don't have the sunglasses on tonight. I normally have them, but I really wanted people to be able to see my face this time. And the cowboy did get a little bit of a haircut, so like I'm gonna trim up that beard tomorrow. Like I'm gonna hit AC fresh, so y'all better be ready. Got my last pre-national weigh-in tomorrow morning.
Nice, man.
For my walk, so we'll know what I'm going in at, and we'll see where I come out. So there's a lot going on, a lot of interesting stuff that's not just related to cards. But look, so here we go. Is the hobby healthy? So I'm gonna start with kind of a comment of where I think of something of generically what I think where we are. I think the hobby is currently in recovery mode from being wildly unhealthy for at least going on the last 2 years. And I think it's recovering from an enormous amount of bad activity, bad advice that has disseminated primarily via social media and has developed what I consider to be extensively terrible habits and attitudes about what the hobby is and what it should be. So I wanted to get that out there, get your reaction to that before we kind of proceed from there.
I think that's really well said. I mean, look, I've been reflecting a lot on the last couple months. And, as I mentioned to you, I think over DMs today, I mean, I think talking about health and the role that like a fever plays when you're unhealthy, I think is an appropriate analogy for right now. Cause I do think that, before kind of a fever breaks, there's a whole host of symptoms that you tend to suffer from. And I think that's true for the hobby. Um, I think that we're seeing, battle lines being drawn, for lack of a better term, and kind of a tussle war of sorts between, dyed in the wool collectors and those that I think are trying to continue to try to steal the narrative into, this kind of investing type frame. And I think that one of the things that we're starting to see more and more is kind of a very high level um, dressing down of those that are kind of most exposed to those narratives, as it were. And so one of the things I think that you and I and some others that we talk to quite a bit have noticed is that in many cases, some of the most kind of noteworthy quote unquote personalities in the market are just using cards as an accessory to their own vanity, right? It has like nothing to do with cards. It has everything to do with their own self promotion, their own kind of brand building. And,
But these are
I
like
think,
brand building without a purpose.
yeah, no, it's brand building just with a purpose is kind of like just narcissism, really.
Yeah.
There's no,
I need attention.
yeah, no,
And
exactly right.
I'm
It's
too
not,
lazy to go out and like make friends in the real world because that's actually too hard. You dummies will click on anything that I show you,
right.
and any sort of reaction, right, makes me feel good that somebody out there is paying attention to me.
Yeah, and what's odd is, as I'm sure that you'll get into later, is that some of this stuff has increasingly devolved into um like victimhood
Yes.
type narratives where it's like if I'm not getting enough clicks or people aren't kind of paying attention to me enough as I get on a private jet or I eat avocado toast or I talk about this rail card that I'm selling next week. Uh
I mean, Bill, I'm included. I'm
yeah.
trying to post my food every day so that people
Yeah.
understand what hobby creators, live on. I mean,
Yeah.
that's important to know. If you're going to be a creator, you need to know how I eat.
So yeah, so look, I guess just to round out the thought, I do think that we are in the midst of a little bit of a identity crisis. And I think that, we all have our own part to, as I mentioned today, like to curate our own experiences for the hobby we want to live in. Right. And,
Yeah,
part of that is walking away from maybe some of the more, visible voices in the hobby only because they don't speak for collectors, or they don't speak for what's sustainable in the long term
right.
for this end market.
Bill, some of them don't even collect cards.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
no
it's a
offense,
joke.
people, but if you consider yourself or aspire to be a hobby influencer or a hobby creator, whatever that may be, I certainly know Bill and I are paying attention. And if 95% of your page doesn't actually include cards, we're going to start calling you out. And we're going to try and get other people to call you out. This whole positivity thing, listen, it's fine. I'm happy to be positive about stuff, but it also gets back to, you know, I follow most of the accounts for the cards, right? And your own personal life is sort of secondary to that for me. Now, and I would say like I've developed a lot of friendships. Bill's one of them. I met Bill through the hobby via social media, and I've met a bunch of other cool people. But like the guys and girls that I follow and really care about the things that they post, right? 90 80 90% of it has something to do with the card,
Yeah.
not what they ate or where they went or some other vanity adventure. And like, listen, I get it. Most of our, like, certainly our Instagram accounts kind of double as your personal thing too. Mine is, right. And I mean, I post every day when I go walk. But I mean, part of that is, to be honest, it's hobby related. And I mean, I've gotten great feedback from people. I have people that message me if I go a 2 days without posting my walk. I was getting messages this morning from some of the people that follow me, like, was everything okay? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just an idiot. I forgot to post my walk video until after lunch.
Right.
But I got out there on time and did my deal. And like, that's just accountability for me.
Yeah.
That's what I use it as. I'm using the hobby to be accountable to myself to actually go on my walks. So, right, okay, so like guilty narcissist, if that's what you want to call me, that's fine.
Yeah. I think, I mean, like
But I'm not like posting trips to wherever. Maybe I post some concert photos and things like that. But I think if you check the receipts, that's something I had to ask my son about what that meant. If you check the receipts, I think I hit the threshold.
yeah, I mean, look, my own feeling about it is, you know, that stuff that kind of sits at the periphery of what is the core of your page, at least as it relates to Instagram, which is cards, is still done in a very authentic way. And and you can tell that you're infusing humor um
And
and
rock and roll, everybody needs a
self
little rock
motivation
and
and rock and
roll.
roll, the rest of it. Like, again, is it my cup of tea? No. Like, but it's not. I don't see it as like something where you're just trying to inflate like a fake what you want to tell yourself that you are, but you're not. Like, that to me is what has been going on a lot lately.
Agreed.
And I think that, and maybe we're just like old timers or whatever, but like, I think for people that have like been around the block a couple times, like, that stuff is just blatantly obvious to
Yeah.
us,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So
All right. So let's. I think I'd like to move on to this point, which is I want to put a developing urban legend in the hobby down as it relates to economics.
okay.
So, and you and I may end up disagreeing on this, and that's okay. But I'm willing to listen to you, even though I think you're probably wrong. But I'm going to tell you why I'm right to start with.
Okay.
Because in the hobby,
That's a fundamental premise to start with
it
the
is.
person
And
you're
I mean,
talking to.
Bill, I know you'll agree with this. In the hobby, everyone is the smartest guy in the room. I should have worn
Totally.
my
Yeah.
I should have worn my Enron shirt tonight. All right, so
Yeah.
here is what I believe the narrative has been, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong, and then I'm going to tell you what's really going on and why I'm right. So prices have been moving down, and a big hobby narrative has been that the reason prices are moving down is really because of economic concerns around inflation, potential recession, and that in general, people in the hobby just don't have the money to spend on it because they're not getting stimmy checks anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all this like, oh, developing the world economies are all falling apart, and the United States is the forefront of that with like 8-10% inflation. All right, I'm going to tell you why that's not right, and I'm going to tell you what is right. So first, we can't keep saying that the high end of the hobby is the driver of it and then turn around and blame economics on that for a couple reasons. Number one, the regular Joe in the hobby, guys, is not spending five figures on cards. They're not. That is such a small percentage of people in the hobby. And if you're gonna keep trying to argue with me that like the dudes that are throwing 100,000 here and half a mil there and blah blah blah, do you think Jim Irsay cares what the price of gas is? That guy's driving a car that probably gets 8 miles to the gallon anyway. All right. And he allegedly just spent $6 million on what appears to be one of at least three now Ali belts, that's a whole developing story. No, these rich guys that are spending this much money on cards, I'm telling you, that all that economic other stuff has nothing to do with their behavior in the hobby. It doesn't. Now, the cat at the bottom end of the hobby, or the guy that's just trying to get in and figure it out, do I think that some of that impacts him? Sure, it does. But look, at the end of the day, if you're new to the hobby, it's like anything else in life. There's a price to pay to know what the heck you're doing. You're either going to pay it in money for training and or get that training by making some bad decisions, or you're going to pay it in time and effort, etc., the use of mental faculties. So it's not going to be free. But this idea that prices are just going down because of economics, I don't believe that's true at all. Because I don't believe that the 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 narrative that's being sold right now, that high-end prices are down because of economics, Bill, I just don't believe it. Because I don't think the people that are spending that much money on this stuff are really that impacted by it. Not in the everyday stuff. They don't care if carrots are $4 a pound now. They don't. But
Yeah, I mean,
I think you disagree
so
with me.
yeah, so I guess I understand kind of the the thread you're pulling on, but here's I don't know. Let me get done with this thought, and then you can tell me if I'm disagreeing with you.
Well, let me
But
go back and make my original statement because I think it's what you'd want to respond to. I don't believe we can keep saying that the high end is the driver of the hobby while simultaneously saying that the decline is because of economic uncertainty. Those are
okay,
not those are
you
not
think those things are mutually exclusive?
yes, I know they are.
Well, okay, well, I don't think that's right. I don't think you know that. But what I say is this: I think that from my perspective, what I believe is going on in the high end is this confluence of really two factors that taken together create the recipe for massive downward pressure prices. The first part of that formula is we've seen a massive run up in quote unquote high end cards for the last 3 to 4 years. And, if you were holding a bunch of high end inventory in 20, let's say 16, 17, and 18, even given what's happened with the correction, you're still
You are
sitting on you're
killing it.
still sitting on massive gains,
Killing it.
right? You're
Yes.
killing it. But okay, so okay, I think that's still true. But I think that what the overhang of the economic situation has done is that I think it's put enough doubt in the minds of some of those people that are still sitting on fairly massive gains to start culling inventory in a way that taken together creates a big, call it, supply problem for these auction houses. And I'm sure we'll get into that for a moment. And so, like, if you've got 3 Jordan PSA 10s and your basis is $60,000 a pop,
Yep.
and you can still reliably sell them for 150 to 250, and you see inflation going up by 10% or whatever. And again, I don't really care how rich you are. Like, that's just a sensible trade. So I think that's part of it, right? Is that you've got a bunch of folks that, because you have this like irrational run up in prices, they've built up these equity inventories that, for the first time in a long time, we're starting to see some pretty meaningful setbacks.
Yep.
And that's causing a little bit of panic, and a little bit of just kind of like, I think, just reasonableness on the part of those people to say, like, hey, if I've got a Jordan Star Rubies, I should probably get rid of it. I think that's part of the formula. I think the second part of the formula, which again I do think relates to the economic situation, is I just don't think, even in the high end, there's a bunch of new money floating around. And I think that, part of why, I think part of what would be very interesting about showing, like, having the auction houses provide more transparency around buyers and sellers, that I think we would find that the new kind of money in the market is like a puddle.
It's recycled. Yeah.
Well, but I guess what I'm saying is like, if you take those two things in tandem, you've got people that are sitting on large inventories of equity that are, for the first time in a while, starting to see a pretty meaningful pushback. You've got, very limited kind of new people in that are saying, hey, even if I do have a lot of money, what's the sense of buying a Jordan card that seems like it continues to fall, right? Like, what's the tangible case for it? I do think those things taken together have created and will continue to create a lot of downward pressure in prices. And I'm convinced that we still haven't seen the bottom of the high end market. Now, do I think that it's been more severe in the, call it, middle market of the hobby, right? Like the sub $2,000 category, and in reality, the like $200 to $1,000 category? Absolutely. And I do think that those things, because they're mostly discretionary income items, are going to be under a lot of pressure for a while. So I guess what I'd say is, the long-winded way of saying, I don't think it's possible to untangle, recessionary fears with what's happening in the high end, irrespective of the fact that, a guy like Elon Musk could afford a banana if it was $27,000 a piece. So I'll stop there.
All right. So it's interesting. 2 things you brought up were the next things I was going to talk about.
Okay.
So I'm gonna semi support you, but not entirely. So
Okay.
So I want to make sure we follow the train of thought. So again, I don't believe you can keep saying that the high end is the driver of the market and then simultaneously blame declines on economic uncertainty. What I really think has happened, and there could be somewhat of a factor that you described of people, just wanting to get out of some of that, what otherwise is just paper equity.
Mhm.
I think people started to wake up a little bit to just the kind of average value of cards that we're looking at. And you and I talked about this before I went, and I mentioned it before I went to Dallas, right? A lot of times and this is going to be 100% true of many cases, display cases in Atlantic City, the average price of the card in there is outrageous compared to what it used to be, right? The number of 5 and 6 figure cards that you see in display cases now is almost unimaginable compared to 5, 6 years ago when, if you saw a $10 or $15,000 Jordan 10 in somebody's case, like that was the highlight, right? Now, $10,000 cards just get looked over like they're like a common kind of. I mean, it's a little bit insane. But I think the other thing, and I think this is the most important factor in terms of declining prices. It is the never-ending run of weekly auctions that are going on multiple platforms. And if people will recall, and you can go back, you can check the receipts again, because I've talked about this. I talked about this for a long time till I was blue in the face about it. The hobby is lazy. Lazy, lazy. People do not want 25 different platforms, 25 different logins. They don't want all that crap. They don't.
Yeah.
They want to be able, and that was one of the things that was almost set some of this in motion was the chest pumping
the fractional
between eBay and PWCC, and then the fractionals want to do it. So and there'd been a lot of talk recently about how soft some of the auctions were. Bill, I'll tell you why that they were soft. eBay runs auctions for great cards every single day of the week, all times of the day. There's always something out there that is a great card that people are bidding on. Every week, and it's happening right now. It's why my alarm went off. I'm going to flick over when I finish this thought. PWCC is ending a weekly auction every week at this time. Every week. They're doing it the Sunday before the National. They're going to do it the Sunday as the National is ending, right? And they do a monthly premiere that's scheduled. It's out there. It's happening, but it happens every month. Golden runs a monthly auction every single month, and then they run a high-end auction however often that they do that. Heritage runs weekly auctions that end on Sunday nights, for those of you who don't know that. Then they run monthly-ish kind of big auctions, and then they run like catalog auctions after that. Alt. Most people that follow us probably don't even know about Alt, right? But Alt has been running auctions maybe every week. I don't know. Everyone keeps telling me I got to look into it because there's great cards on there that are going at half price. But I actually think most of those cards are probably owned by Alt. If they keep it up, they're going to be out of business. REA runs catalog auctions. Memory Lane runs catalog auctions. So just thinking back into this last weekend, okay? eBay's always there, but Golden, Heritage, and Alt all had auctions ending on the same night at the same time, going into extended bidding. So you can hear me now, believe me later, or just accept that it's true. The hobby's lazy. Do you know how many people are on all three of those sites firing full bullets? Yeah, you're shaking. You know as well as I do. It was not very many people. You could probably, it is in the teens at best, were the number of people that were doing that, right? So and I've talked about this a number of times. I've been saying it over and over. The proliferation of all the different platforms, because everybody wants their own market share, is the primary culprit for declining prices, because there's no inventory control, right? There's no inventory control whatsoever. And I'm not suggesting that these guys should all get together and kind of scheme against us as in the hobby to release X number of things. Well, all I'm saying is that there's been a never-ending supply, and that's been growing since PWCC moved away from eBay. It hasn't been going down, it's going up because they're all fighting for market share. Now, what has more recently also contributed to that's been going on for months, right? And we're just kind of hitting fever pitch with it. The other thing that's influenced it is, and I'm guilty of this, most of the hardcore types that were providing some level of liquidity on all this stuff have been trying to build funds for the national. So we've been much more sellers than buyers because we want to be well heeled in person for the biggest show that you're going to get for 12 months. Not to mention, you're paying a bunch of money to get up there, so you need some money to try to make it work out if that's going to be your thing, right?
Yeah.
Add to that, we're in the natural sports lull of the year. July and August are effectively dead, right? NBA's done. NFL's not started. Soccer still doesn't really count. The NHL is done. The only thing you have is baseball. Baseball is like super boring.
Yeah,
right?
this year's been brutal.
Okay. Then add to that, that's all happening on the tail end of the summer where people are getting whatever they can of their last vacations in, their last trips. And remember, where there's still sort of pent up demand for travel that we're still seeing kind of spilt over from COVID days. But I mean, this happens every year. We're at the bottom of the interest to be able to be focused on cards right now. So I believe all of that, the economic uncertainty just sort of added a weird layer to it of something that the rest of it was just sort of happening normally, plus the proliferation of the different platforms. That's what's killing it because collectors don't have enough attention span to go out there and search, and there's no aggregator of it, right? I don't know how to put in a search that's going to tell me, hey, when the 2011 atomic that I need to complete my fourth set hits some website. Like I have to go search for that crap, right? And that's part of being kind of a hardcore collector. So I believe those other factors are way more involved in this. And then, and I'm not trying to suggest the economic uncertainty isn't a contributor. I just don't believe it's the main contributor. I think the proliferation of the websites is the biggest contributor, like to 70-75% responsible for what's going on. Because it used to be there were really kind of three places to look: eBay, PW, and eBay, Golden, and a couple of the other auction sites. If you covered 3-4 places, you saw 95% of the cards that you cared about. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I mean, look, I think the first conversation that you and I had formally online was around not the fractionalization of individual cards, but the fractionalization of the marketplace and what that meant from a, healthiness perspective, but what it also meant from like dollars.
You have an alt log?
What it meant for collectors and for just dollars and cents, right? I mean, I saw some guy that I followed today talk about, make sure you get your cards in for this PWCC auction. We'll send you FedEx labels, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so we can sell your cards for 60% of what you think it is because we just want our fees. And I think in some respects, like outside of eBay, which I think is going to be able to withstand no matter what happens, I do think that, a lot of these other auction houses are starting to freak out because they are transaction oriented models. And, if prices get cut by half, your revenue gets cut by half.
Yep.
If inventory gets cut by half, then your revenues on a compounded basis are a fourth of what you thought they would be. And the problem with what's been going on, at least in a lot of these areas of the hobby economy, is that, we've seen it with PSA, although I think they'll be able to weather the storm. We've seen it with some of the grading companies. We've clearly seen it with the auction houses. They're hiring and making these, massive investments in marketing and technology, on the heels of the market that they must have known was unsustainable. And now that stuff is like really rearing its head. And I think they're in a panic. And I think that we're going to start to see, whether it's Alt or PWCC or some of these other places, I just think that we're going to see some of these business models that are going to fail because, they were, it's the same issue that Peloton, the exercise bike company had, right? It's like they extrapolated all this growth that wasn't sustainable, and they built factories and hired thousands of people to manage inventory that never came to fruition. And look, I think, I guess, there's a lot to unpack with what you said. There's nothing that I think on the surface that I disagree with clearly, because I think so much of the ground you covered was ground that we've talked about publicly or privately. I do think that the thing that ties a lot of this behavior together, though, is the overhang in the economy. And, whether that's a primary factor or a tertiary factor, I think, is debatable. But, I think the gluttony of supply, the lack of demand, that there's something that has to do with splintering. But I think there's also something about, like, if you have to, like, eager bidders on some of these items, this stuff has to be in the back of their minds, because it's strewn across the the news media every other minute. But a couple like reflections I'd have on what you said. I think that one of the more interesting things was this comment about just the prices in the room, and I think, to borrow a little bit of a stock analogy, I think that so much of what's like defined the modern hobby in the two most popular sports in the hobby, which is football and basketball, has been really no different than some of the irrational phenomena that we've seen in the stock market around tech stocks.
Yeah.
Right. Where, but people are pricing in future performance based on assumptions that they must know are unrealistic. This happened back in the .com boom, as you remember, around eyeballs. It's happening now around utilization and subscriptions. And I think there are some corollaries between that behavior and, thinking Tyrese Maxey is going to be the next perennial all-star, or thinking that, there's, 12 quarterbacks under the age of 25 that, all have prices that are within, a couple $1,000s of one another, when the reality is one of them is going to make it. And when those prices are,
like, I posted that this week. I posted it just yesterday. I was looking at, the price of a John Elway rookie, right around $6-7 grand, PSA 10. There's not a ton of them. There's certainly fewer PSA 10s than there are numbered of 10 RPAs of these other guys. But like, those guys the current guys sell for 50 grand. Elway sells for 7. And I'm about ready to take a bet with anyone for some reasonable amount of money that says 5 years from now, including Patrick Mahomes, if you want it, Elway may have more Super Bowl wins than anyone in the current game other than Brady. Right?
Yeah, but I think this belies, I think, some of what we're talking about, and I guess you would put a lot of these cards in the high end category because they're trading for tens of thousands of dollars to a certain degree. But I think that, again, like, to go back to the economic point, like, I think that so much of like what defines baseball prospecting, NBA first or second year teenagers, and increasingly NFL quarterbacks under the age of 25, are highly speculative, hot money bets that is akin to like hyper day trading. And when the music proverbially stops, which it seems like it is to a large degree, I think you have been seeing like massive downward pressure on price because the game's up, man. Like, like it should have never made any sense for somebody to spend $25,000 on a Kyler Murray rookie. Like it just never should have made any sense, right? It should have never made any sense to spend, in some cases, six figures for a LaMelo Ball rookie. And the list goes on and on and on. And you don't, and again, like maybe to borrow something that one of the people I know you're close to has said before, this whole like not for you fallacy, right? Like just because you don't want to spend $50,000 on a 19-year-old kid who's, one late night away from driving his Bugatti into a crowd of people or beating his girlfriend senseless, right? Like just because you don't decide to make that decision means that it's not for you. Like, excuse me, fuck off, right? Like that's stupid. That's like
and I said I think that was just sort of a
it's
bad,
just like that
almost
type
kind
of
of frustrating moment
sophistry,
for him.
that type of reasoning, that type of like line of thinking. First of all, it's beneath the person that said it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
It is also, I think, emblematic of the kind of use case and the continued rationale that group has continued to use as prices have grounded down lower. And again, like, where's the end in sight? And I think, again, like, that's why I think like the economic stuff does matter, right? Because there are a lot of people that have bought those cards, and leveraged themselves to death to get to them because they felt like, hey, you know what, this is a 10,000 card it went to 30. There's no reason why I won't go to 90. And all of a sudden they're starting to panic. And
we've got to grant a little bit that, I mean, my position is that an overwhelming number of those people are actually, they're more like degenerate gamblers. They really have they really have they don't have receipts and chops in terms of like having done something excellently for an extended period of time.
No, totally. No, no, exactly. And that's day trading in a nutshell in today's world. Yeah. I mean, it's a high speed form of gambling, and and again, like, you don't need to own those cards to have an
opinion on them. Like, I don't own a Michael Jordan 10, and every auction keeps proving me more right. But I don't want people to think I'm sort of beating my own drum on that, because listen, it's a card I'd like to own. I really would. Right. And I had a choice at one point to kind of own one or something else. And I went a different direction because I thought they'd be there. And then they went crazy and I felt like an idiot. But I also like knew that I would have never rode it that whole way. And like, am I going to get another chance at it? Yeah, actually, because I made a bunch of other smart moves in lieu of it. But the timing just hasn't been right. I've said publicly that card's going to go to 150. And then I think it'll stop. Like it's slowly getting there. I actually expect at this point now we're going to see the 150 before the end of the year, or maybe kind of first quarter next year. I think that's kind of where it stops for a lot of different reasons we can talk about another time. But I'm 100% with you. I don't think you have to own something to be able to have a valid opinion about it. What is difficult in the social media world, the 30-second clips, is being able to describe your rationale of why you think that is. And it's part of the reason we started this podcast, right? Is we wanted
agreed.
We wanted to go into a little bit more depth in the things that we were seeing, and talk about markets, talk about specific cards at some point, talk about players.
Well, and I think as you said earlier, like also, and I think as you said earlier, like also like being in a position where, particularly for the people that we do actually like enjoy and respect quite a bit, call out behavior that in some respects is counterintuitive to their perspective, and just curious, I guess is what I'd say. But anyway,
so man, sounds like we're pretty close to the same page. You think the economic uncertainty is a little heavier than I do. But
I think the thing I have
agree that the proliferation of the sites has actually been negative for prices.
100%.
100%
Here's what I'd say.
agree on
This is the way I would articulate it, Dave. It's accelerated decline.
that.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with
It's
that.
accelerated the decline, but here's the
100%
thing.
agree with that.
But here's the thing. Like, that can still be true, and we could still be in the third or fourth inning of what's happening from a macroeconomic perspective.
For sure.
Right? Because like if the Fed has to go about, raising rates for the next 8 quarters, and we start
my
to.
only I know where you're going with this. My one counter to that would be, if you really believe that the economic uncertainty is that big a part of it, then I think you also believe that the totality of the sports card collecting world is so shallow that effectively 25 to 30 people were responsible for a 10 to 20x run broadly across all cards in the hobby. And I don't believe that. But I've also been I was made fun of early on because I kept saying over and over that I didn't actually believe the high end was the thing that was driving the hobby. It helps in terms of bringing new
notoriety and just
and just recognition that this is something that's cool and should be fun. That all helps. But like if those 25 to 30 people were really responsible for that level of price increase, if any of you out there are worried about that, the best advice I could give you right now is you should sell every card that you own. Get out right now, because you're not going to get a better time in the next 6 months. The price is only going down if that's true. And I don't believe that's true.
Okay, right? So that leads me to a question that I'd love you to answer. And it dovetails in that comment. I have yet to hear from someone that provides, I think, a reasonable case that card values are not lower a year from now. Why? So I have yet to hear one. I'd love for you to provide that case. And look, I was holding on to this idea that perhaps it existed in these, far off corners of the hobby that are littered with less than 10 pop counts. But if you look at some of these golden auctions where the high end Lucas and Mahomes are trading, their pop 2s and pop 4s are trading at 50% of the value from a couple of months ago. Again, like I have not heard a single person articulate a position that any reasonable person would say, you know what, today's the day to buy cards.
Yeah. But I mean that.
Give me a reason.
Right? Nobody knows where the bottom is. No one knows.
Give me a reason.
So I can't give you a reason. Well, one of the reasons I'll give you, there's no way to track broadly where we are.
Okay.
Right.
So your answer is the dysfunction of the market provides a paralyzing ability to answer the question.
Bill, one of the problems we've got is we don't know how many sales are going on. Right? When the market was a little bit more concentrated at eBay, we had a public company that was disclosing that information. Even if it wasn't in their quarterly reports, we were annually getting some estimate of what their sports card and memorabilia market was, correct? We don't have that now. We don't know what Golden's doing, right?
No.
Because they got folded into a BS.
Again, but you're making my point.
but I'm saying one of the issues you've got is you don't have the readily available information to have any kind of sense of what's happening. Like,
Okay, but
do
here's
I think the
but you're making my
transacting has
point,
gone
because if
down?
that's true, if
Yes.
that
Do
was
I think
true,
pricing has gone down? Yes. Do I, as I've been saying over and over, I don't believe interest is waning that much. I think interest is still quite high. Now, has the growth rate backed off Netflix? Yes, for now. But I do think that there are still way more people aware of it. And as and where they sort of dip their toe in, we just don't know where that's going to be. And there's no way for me to sort of guarantee that the market's better a year from now, but I still think that there are lots of cards that are hitting prices now that are becoming hugely attractive to some people, right? I actually bought more, honestly, Bill, this week than I have in the last 4 months, because I'm seeing what I believe to be panic sales.
okay.
And I see a real absence of kind of deep bidder pool, which to me is indicative that on certain types of quality of issues, we're I believe we're coming into a bottom on some of that stuff. Now you mentioned like things like Luca's and other things that, like, quite honestly, some of those prices just, they never made sense to me in the first place. And I've been posting a lot more
Yeah,
about that
that's
because
fair.
I want people to hear kind of where my head is at
Yeah, that's
when I
listen.
see it, right?
That's fair. That's fair. I guess all I'm trying to the critical thinking exercise I'm trying to go down is a lot of the things that you mentioned around the fractionalization of the marketplace were true, to a large degree before
Yeah.
things started to slide. They're still true today. So again, that's a contributing factor.
And one of the
What's
problems is
different?
you and I were early in recognizing it, right?
Yeah.
And we recognizing and criticizing it. And it does feel like some people are kind of catching up to where we were. Because I
Oh
think
yeah, yeah, but I feel like that.
you
Yeah,
and
no,
I
of course.
both did slowed our purchasing months ago, right?
Well, no, to your point that you made, which is the right one, around if you believe what I'm saying is true, you should sell everything. I did that 4.5 months ago,
Right.
right?
Yes.
I only kept the
Yes.
cards that I
I
really
remember
wanted to
you
hold.
kept the ones that you wanted.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But it's kind of funny because I mean, we go back to the kind of the tagline of this episode around like, do I think the hobby is healthy? What's interesting is like, as I've gotten into the exercise of just realizing that my free time is precious, and therefore I should only allocate time towards forms of media that
Yeah.
not they don't like necessarily just like, I'm not looking for like positive reinforcement all the time, but
No.
like just like I'm an old enough person to like filter out what's bullshit and not, right? And so like
I
as
think
I've gone through the
you're looking for interesting, you're looking
yeah,
for compelling, you're looking for thought provoking, but I also suspect you, like me, you're looking for enjoyment and fun,
yes,
which is a fantastic segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about. Like how I set that
which
up?
is
All right.
yeah,
So I want to talk a little bit about content before we get into a couple more things. So content, I think content was hugely responsible for part of the run up, right? Because we went from sort of the early, and when I say early, I'm talking 2019. We went from kind of the influencing to investing pretty quick, right? And that has been a massive focus that we've seen some people back away from, right? Because like I had been, somewhat critical of sports card investor Jeff and some of the things that he'd done. Um, but then I simultaneously like some of the people that he's hired. So I guess I can't be that critical because he does have an eye for talent in terms of some actually smart people that work there too. And I'm 100% sure he's a smart guy. That's actually someone I would like to meet this week in AC. So if any of you guys see this, Teapot, if you see this, you got to set that up. But from the investing perspective, the majority of the money, and you mentioned this earlier, the majority of the money that was made during this run up was made prior to 2019 when all these cards were purchased, right? If we were seeing all these like real millionaires since 2019, Bill, they wouldn't be wearing t-shirts like I wear. They wouldn't be wearing jeans that are hugging their nuts half to death, and they'd get out of their like Vans and other crappy sneakers, right? I mean, wouldn't they do that? I would do that. I'd trade
Yeah.
my used car in for a new car if I had that much money. I wouldn't have to rent a Lamborghini to make a video, right? So the big money was made prior to that, which were people that sort of saw this sort of setting up. Now, whether or not they capitalize on it, I don't know, because so much of that equity is still, I actually think, unrealized. I know it is in my collection, and it probably is in yours too. But post that, most of the content was around kind of the investment flipping, make your bucks game, right? And the reality was in the last 12 months, it was really just money being reallocated, cards being kind of swapped out, because the last 12 months has 100% been down. It doesn't matter what, I don't think it matters what sector you look in. Maybe Chris and his band of hobby geniuses can dispute that with some, they can make up some algorithm and index that proves me wrong, but I'm pretty sure everything has been down for the last 12 months. So it's really just been reallocations and consolidations. And there's been a more recently kind of the psychological element of, hey, my paper gains are getting eviscerated and I'm still sitting here unrealized.
Yeah.
And you right, and all, I'm like looking at my notes and you set that up so well, but that I think a lot of this inventory dump has been people realizing, holy crap, if I don't get out of this now, I'm not going to be positive. And it's not really so much about the money. It's more about I'm crazy. And if I don't go out as a winner, I'm going to be sitting here with this giant L on my forehead and I'm going to be an idiot. And I can't let people know that I'm an idiot. So then that kind of morphed into flip, 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 flip. And then when that sort of stopped working, and we've been seeing this lately, you and I have been giggling like crazy. I giggle more because you're a little bit into it. When the cards weren't working, people moved to watches and they didn't really understand what the heck they're doing. And now they're losing money on watches. You people in your rollies are stupid. There's an easy way to know what time it is. It's called the sun. It sits up in the air, and the Indians and people who didn't have watches knew what time it was every day. And guess what? When the sun's down, you're pretty close to needing to be asleep anyway. So who cares what time it is? But that's a separate episode. Then they moved to kind of pop culture and Marvel and all this other stuff, and they didn't understand that. They lost on that. What's the common denominator of all that? Well, it was the investment focus. There was zero collecting direction. It was all just about what's hot, what can I make money on? And it got exacerbated by social media because you're following people that don't ever show you the losses. It's called the social media fallacy. If you've never heard of that, you're hearing about it now from the Sports Card Cowboys. We're letting you in on the secrets of the world. They don't show you the losses. So it becomes this self-fulfilling social media cycle that's just false. You're only seeing the winners. You don't know that like these guys are eating spam and hot dogs and they're going 4 people to a one bed hotel at the card show. 2 guys are actually sleeping down by the pool. the hotel manager has to tell them, excuse me, sir, young sir, you can't sleep here. Like that, gang, that's been going on. And but what's crazy is you follow them, you love their story, and you end up pumping the pumpers. You're choosing not to believe that some of these people have sponsorships. You think they're making a living flipping cards, and they're not. They're getting paid by people to be on platforms to sell cards to you, right? You're continually giving passes for bad behavior for people. Like, in the absence of something that's rational, whatever appears to be obvious is probably the truth. And we're seeing that play out over and over and over and over, right? You're not recognizing that the breakers they're only featuring the hits. They don't ever show you the box where someone got stuck with a Rex Ryan white sparkle on a $2,000 box. But Bill, you know this is happening, but we're going to cheer Fanatics on. Michael Rubin and the crew, we're going to cheer them on. They're so good for the hobby. No, they're not good for the hobby right now. They're there for money, and the more Rex Ryans they can get you to win and keep buying packs, there's only going to be one winner.
So you know what this, you know this, you know this,
Tell me
you know
I'm
what this
wrong. I'm
whole,
an old guy. I'm a cynic. I'm an old guy.
but you know, like, you know what this whole, like, look, you know what this whole, I mean, I think this whole kind of situation, at least what you're talking about, can be distilled into a pretty succinct analogy, if I can. Have you ever been to like a carnival, like an old school carnival?
Bro, we grew up with carnies.
Okay, so like, you know, like in the carnivals, they'd have like one lane, like they'll have like, you know, the makeshift roller coasters that you are taking your life in your hands every time you do it, right? But they always have like one like lane that exists the carnival that's filled with all these games, right? And like one's like throw a ball at a duck, one's, you know, the foosball thing, the basketball hoop. There's all these other kind of games that exist. And I think to a certain degree, what social media as it relates to the hobby has evolved into is the carnival lane, where the people that are manning those games are trying to solicit business, and they're doing so by, in the case of the carnival, you know, pumping up the rewards that one can get by, you know, hitting a duck with a ball. And what's been going on from like sport to sport, from esoteric sport to sport to sport, is this game where a new kind of stall is installed at the carnival, and they're running this game in a way where they're purporting that these games are going to exist when they know themselves that's not true, and all they're trying to do is get people to throw balls at ducks. And you know, I think that the job of, you know, people that really care about what's going on and like want this to be, you know, a hobby first and foremost, and a place to kind of bring together like-minded people towards a common goal of collecting things. You know, I think we all have like a very visceral reaction against that type of behavior, and it manifests in snarky posts, it manifests in the establishment of something like this that, you know, 30 people will watch or whatever. But you know, it's that, to me, is the kind of counter reaction to a lot of this behavior that we just know deep down is just, it's just not going to age well.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's something that we should care a lot about.
Yeah.
So
all right, so continuing along my line of thought, I have a handful of points that I think are important to set up. Our final is the hobby healthy, and then we'll move on to the natural. All right, so when I think about the hobby, I've been thinking about this a lot. And some of it doesn't line up at all with how I collect, but I think it's important. So my number one point on for this segment is new product is key to the health of the hobby, right? It the hobby in the end, in terms of new interest, is not going to be generated based on trying to convince people to collect cards of any age, whether it's vintage or modern or otherwise. It really
Agreed.
does revolve around the new products.
Agreed. Yep.
Everything everything evolves out of that. And it's required to move things forward. Whether you're talking about, current performance on the field, or you're talking about technological advancement, or you're talking about just aesthetic quality of the cards. Like, the advancement of the hobby is only going to happen based on new product. And one of the unfortunate things at the moment is Panini's going to lose their license soon. And if you believe that they care about the ongoing health of the hobby, I mean, honestly, I have an island to sell you that's about 3 miles off the coast of Galveston. Okay. I'm not even going to use the Florida. I'm going to, let's get on out there. Okay. Panini is going to be grabbing dollars as fast as they can. If you believe that Topps and Fanatics cares about the long-term health of the hobby, just understand they raised a ton of money outside the normal. They didn't issue stock, Bill. They got separate investors for that segment that's not part of the public company, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't an investor in that. Were you? And I just don't know it. No.
But I mean,
But if you were an investor, you would be expecting a return not 7 years from now. Thank you very much. You're looking for a little sooner than that. So look, and I think you see this in the social media content. All of the sponsored content and the card production content that's out there is pretty much focused on new products, right? Why? Well, because that's where they make their money. They got to sell that crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got to sell it. So just everybody be aware. The new releases have to kind of drive where we go next, because that's how you get the new money in initially. I had made this point, and it got picked up by Teapot around kind of the evolution of the collector, but it pretty much starts at
wax is the gateway drug of the hobby.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's key to understand. The new products are paramount. And I guess to put a fine point on it, I think the problem with the new products is they're so freaking expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, all we ever hear about is immaculate and flawless and all this crap. It's like $5,000 a box. I love Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan is a collector. By the way, if you're in Atlantic City, keep your eyes out for Rex Ryan. I can almost guarantee he'll be there sort of incognito, but if you know what you're looking for, you'll find him. He set collects is the thing I love about him. He's got a list. It's all handwritten. It's not like Excel crap. Rex Ryan will be there. If I see him, I'll take a picture. I posted pictures of him before when I saw him. I never talked to him. This year I may talk to him and ask him to come on to the Sports Card Cowboys for an interview.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right. So, but back to the boxes are so expensive, like they're almost impossible. And there's it's 3 cards in a pack. I don't understand it, but that's out there. All right. My second point, the auction houses and the consignment services, right? They get paid when they sell your stuff. It doesn't matter what it sells for. And you were kind of expressing some of their concern of like prices are going down, they're worried about it. I don't think they're worried about it at all. I actually think that's why they're pushing so much inventory. So they're like, they don't give a crap. What do they care? They're going to make their 10 to 20% no matter what, dude. And here was the problem with it. The proliferation of the auction sites and the number of people that were doing this was kind of sold to the hobby as an ability to create competition and lower the cost to the consigners. And the exact opposite is true. The price hasn't gone down.
Yeah.
Not the price of the service. It's not going down, but the price of the cards are going down, right?
Yeah.
And I've said this over and over. I can't wait for it to be true. So I will do an end zone dance on this. eBay is going to increase their cost to do business on their site. Y'all keep thinking that's not going to happen. And I've been telling you over and over, and I'm going to end dance on your grave. I'm going to end zone dance on your grave on this. eBay is going to go up, not down, because they clearly don't care about trying to increase their market share. They care about increasing their margin. They're going to start charging the sellers for the authentication, and they're going to bump the cost of selling their site, because we as a hobby have continually demonstrated that we're okay with a 15 to 20% VIG from the auction houses. Because unless you go in and do your own deal separately, not only do you give up the 20% premium, some people are giving up a 10% seller premium on top of it, Bill. Some people are paying 30% to sell their cards on these auction houses. And I may get myself in trouble and not be able to bid anymore, but I doubt that because I'm a pretty big bidder. But I'm sure some of these auction houses don't like me letting people know.
If I can interject, it's my new saying that I've been toying with, but I think I'll just say it now and then maybe I'll follow up with something later on it. But my new thing right now is the pump dump to dump. Right. So it's kind of like somebody pumps a card that gets dumped on somebody. They realize that they're holding the bag and then they have to dump it. And so that's how you get into a place where, things become a 60 to 70% of comps, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's the pump dump to dump. I mean,
yeah.
Anyway.
And look, there are people out there that they've been talking about, and even the auction houses themselves, right? They've been sort of forced to defend themselves that they're marketing these cards. If the normal guy out there has sold anything through any of these companies, I got news for you. They're not marketing crap. They're marketing certain cards from certain people, but they're not marketing all the cards. So they're basically not telling you the truth, right? And by marketing the big end cards, yeah, do they get some extra views? Sure, they do. But on most of the other stuff, they're lazy. You know why? Because they can be. Because we don't require anything else. There was a great set of stories. I don't remember who did it recently, of some of the lots that were sitting in a couple of these auction houses that had terrible descriptions. They had like buried in the details the list of the cards, but they didn't even like put in the auction description like the best card. So guess what happened? It all went for half price. Now, good on you to whoever who bought it, right? Because, and I've said over and over, the hustle matters. If you dig through a lot of these auctions, especially golden auctions right now, you can find deals because they're not really describing things the way that they should be. So unless you dig into the details and look at every single picture for every single auction, which requires an enormous amount of time and energy. But if you're doing that, you're finding a great deal. Now, even beyond that, just know there are side deals out there too. Every one of these auction houses, as they try to continue to get market share to pump up the value of what they do, they're cutting side deals all over the place. And and I will contend till I'm blue in the face that when that happens, it is an impediment to serious investment within
Yeah.
the hobby, right? Because Bill, that doesn't really happen anywhere else.
No, of course not. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, well, I mean, and now and then and again, like the whole we've been talking about this for an hour, right? I mean, if we take all these like things together, like again, unless you're like deeply passionate about this stuff, like it's like there is a part of even me sometimes where I'm kind of like, what the hell am I doing? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like what like I like, and this is why I've just like decided to narrow, my
Consignment slab is
the
open at any time for any sort of consignment that anyone would like to discuss.
but this is why I've like narrowed my aperture around things because I'm just kind of like this is just it's just weird. It's gross. It's like it's unbecoming behavior. Like there are things that you see every single day on Instagram or some of these noteworthy people that like you would lecture your kids if they did a fraction of it. You know what I mean? You would be like, that's not how we do things around here. Like I mean, it's like, come on. Anyway. Yeah,
All
it's
right.
hard to argue with anything that you said. I mean, I think that you're right. I mean, look, I think we've got a massive transparency problem as we've talked about.
But I've also said, and I'll be on the record again. I think some of these places are going out of business. They're going to go out of business before
no
the
question.
year. And I'll get to a little bit more of this.
Well, no. So and by the way, this is where I feel like I can say, something around this that I think carries some weight because it's ostensibly part of what I do. And again, I mean, this would be more than a contributing factor, but the financing markets are a complete mess right now, like a complete mess, and the availability of debt capital right now, particularly for some of these like high growth kind of venture style deals, is non-existent. Like those markets are literally shut down. And so, if you were, a venture person and you were trying to, triangulate against a, 5 to 7x your cash on cash return, but that required, fairly readable capital, debt capital at 5 to 7%, and all of a sudden all you can get is mezz at 20. The math doesn't work.
No.
And I think that's where there are some buzzsaws. What's that?
Mezz at 20, you're out of business.
Yeah, you're out of business. So
all right, so next point. I actually think most people don't know this based on the activity and some of the things I see on social media. Maybe you may be surprised by this, maybe not. The overwhelming majority of dealers, it shows, this is their side hustle.
I believe that. Yeah, I believe that.
There are very few dealers at each show that are living off this. But there are tons of people on the internet that are pretending like they are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And like we'll name names later. Just know we got our eyes on you suckers. Listen, if your wife has a real job where she gets paid and you have like health insurance, and I'm not being critical, right? At all. Because if that's the situation you're in, that's great. But stop acting like you're living on it then. You're living on your wife's pay and her insurance coverage, not your astuteness of swapping and flipping cards, right? I mean, I can tell you in my house, that's not the deal. And I've said many times before, we're living off the equity of a bunch of great decisions that I made over the past 20 years of building equity in a collection that allowed me to do what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I'm also the first one to admit I'm not doing great right now. eBay sucks, right?
Yeah.
People are dropping out of bids or dropping out of stuff all the time. Like my sales are at an all-time low in the past 3 to 5 years. Terrible, terrible. But I'm trying to put it together. I'm going to go to AC and try to make some moves, and you do what you can. But I mean, I had a massive equity, which was when I did this, that was there on purpose. I knew if things went really, really, really bad, I had 5 cards in my collection that could set me up for 2 to 3 years so that I wouldn't necessarily have to go find another job. But like, don't believe what you see on the internet. If PWCC or whatnot's involved, those are sponsors. If those guys are sponsoring you, you need to understand you're not making a living on the hobby. You are an employee. And the second that you're not interesting, you're going to be unemployed. And that is a huge part of what's going on in social media right now. Whatnot, Loop, right? Soon to be eBay Live. They're employees. You're an employee. You think you're an independent contractor, but I got news for you. You're not. And you may find out the hard way if you can't keep up whatever requirements they're putting on you. And if they haven't put any requirements on you yet, just know it's coming. And I saw this headline recently that Whatnot had like doubled in valuation. We'll see about that. You know what, y'all think eBay doesn't read headlines? Okay, all right. Hear me now, believe me later. I've said it for a long time. If eBay wants to shut any of this crap down, they will. They just don't want to because we've demonstrated as a hobby we're stupid and we'll pay more for it. They're going to figure out the right point, and they're going to put some of these people out of business, or they're just going to buy them. And some people will do great. It's just not going to be any of the content creators. They're not going to do great at all. They're going to get a crappy employment deal to stick around and keep hawking stuff and not have any real upside on any of it. But that's coming. All right, so to wrap this up, is the hobby healthy? My answer right now is no. The hobby is highly unhealthy. It's been unhealthy since 2020. I do think some things are starting to shift. I want to believe that we're in recovery mode. I really do think that we probably are. If we're not, we're certainly about to be. There have been multiple events, issues, people that have negatively impacted the hobby as a whole. I think the overwhelming majority of people that we've seen get involved have actually had a massively negative influence because there was such a focus on the investment side and not the collecting side. And I made this comment to somebody earlier. You need to start building a collection, not building a portfolio.
I hate when people use portfolio.
You really want to enjoy the hobby,
just
build a collection, not a portfoldio.
Yeah, it's just
the best thing. That's the best advice of the night. And
can I give you? Okay, go ahead.
Jump in. No, jump in because I know you like that.
My the way I would answer that question is the hobby healthy is I think that the people that over the last 6 to 9 months that have, you know,
Had the microphone.
no, well, no, I know what I'm saying is like, I think that the participants in the hobby that over the last 6 to 9 months have gotten back to basics. They've searched for avenues within the hobby that are filled predominantly with collectors. I think would I think there's a strong case, and I would put myself in this category, that it's actually like a lot healthier than people imagine. Those spaces, um, and I've had, in some of this stuff I've done with the trout collecting and some of the stuff I've done with the hockey collecting, I've had more positive experiences over the last 3 months than I have in the past 2 years with those people, that in some respects are kind of relieved that some of the hot air is out of the room and we can get back to just like the exploration side of collecting. And we can do that knowing that like the expectations are not going to be so egregious as they used to be, because people are just kind of getting more common sense infused some of those conversations. Like, so I'd say like I'd say that we all have a personal responsibility to make, to lean into things that make our hobby experience as healthy as it can be. And that doesn't mean that you like ignore the noise. It doesn't mean that you are one of these like positivity freaks. It just means that like I think that most people are smart enough to know what authentic behavior looks like.
Yeah.
And they need to do a better job of just realizing that, as I mentioned earlier today, there's a lot of people that are looking for ways to waste your time. And you got to just tune all that crap out and lean into things that
I mean, Bill,
excite you.
Bill, don't you want to let's go?
Right. Right. I mean,
I'm sorry.
I mean,
I
it
thought we
sounds
were
like,
let's going here, not.
yeah, but it sounds like kind of like, it sounds so simple, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people right now that are following, tens, if not hundreds of people that they don't give a shit about. They don't care about the cards they collect. They don't care about
Right.
their vantage point. And yet it's
They
like,
feel like they're popular, and so you have to kind of follow them to be part of the crowd, when the real kind of hack is, because I follow all these same people, and the only reason I follow them is so that I know exactly what not to do.
yeah, I know.
And they show me every day what not to be involved in.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how
Listen, I don't want our listeners to be frustrated. Bill and I agreed we're going to get through the national before we start calling names. You're going to want to be here in a couple weeks, gang, because the Cowboys,
yeah, no, I know.
the
I think
Cowboys
I
are
think
going to get the 6 shooters out.
oh
And
yeah,
we're
no,
going to
I
start
think it's
putting
time. I think it's time to start. No, I think it's time to start, after that happens, to start naming names and really calling people out
Yeah.
and being as
So
vocal as we
just
can
know,
about
if
it.
you're watching this, like, look in the mirror, make sure it ain't you. If you're worried it is you, it is. All right. So, yeah,
Okay, so can we transition to the national?
well, I have like 2 final points. We talk a lot about the hot potato. I actually think it's been a hot parrot potato. Social media has been, you hear it from someone else. And again, I've been at the shows. You haven't been at the shows, so I know from the experience of the shows. I hear the parrot, right? I'm gonna get one to start carrying around if y'all keep it up. Until that stops, I just don't know how we grow. And I said earlier, I think the growth is kind of stopped. I actually think the growth rate is backing up. And until that kind of subsides, I just don't know how we get the new money. I think we're stuck with the recycled money. And again, I hate doing this. I'm gonna give a compliment to Jeff and his team. You know those guys better than me. They've done a great job of reorienting their space. Jeff has not been out there telling us about his best buys. Now, part of it is because his best buys are now his biggest losers. But he kind of got quiet. I think he's reorienting his space. He's been listening clearly to some of the guys on his team. So I mean, listen, I got to give credit where credit's due. I'm 100% on here right now. We're gonna
Ladies and gentlemen,
get there.
ladies and gentlemen,
I
Hal
would love to
is
meet him. I
officially
would love
frozen
to
over.
talk to him when I get to Atlantic City. I'm hoping Teapot will set that up for me. Like you know, and this is me eating crow a little bit, but you know, he and some others, but him most specifically, I think they're trying to reorient what they're doing around the current environment because I think he's realized we're in this weird kind of vacuum at the moment, and I mean it could break either way. I think this week is coming up is a great time for kind of putting people in their camps. Um, and look, you and I both agree, social media has not helped in the past year. It's actually made, I believe it's made everything worse because you've had all this sponsorship sorts of dollars, right? And you and I have been talking about it over and over. Like don't be a muppet, right? Follow the dollars where it looks like and feels like there's a sponsorship. There is. The sponsored accounts are about money. That's the only thing they care about. Stop. You've got to stop giving people the benefit of the doubt and just acknowledge them for what they are. If they don't want to admit it, that should factor into your view of how truthful they are with you. You and I don't have any sponsorships. Do you?
Fuck no.
No. And you're not sponsoring me. None of the auction houses are sponsoring me. If you see me promoting anyone, it's because they asked me to do something that I asked a ton of questions about. I'm going to be involved in some stuff here coming up soon, but that was of my own free will. I didn't get any dollars. I didn't get any auction credits, nothing like that. I did it because it was cool and I actually liked the person a lot that asked me to participate. So at the end of the day, until we get the shift back to collecting, I don't think we move this hobby forward. This is not a financial industry. It never will be. These are not financial assets. They're not liquid. Anyone who talks to you that way, Chris, I'm talking to you. You cannot talk that way. And what's crazy is Josh says it. Your buddy, your partner has to go out there and he can't even defend it. And it's not because I don't think Chris is not a smart guy. He is a highly intelligent.
No, he's phenomenally smart.
Ton of great moves in the hobby. So did Josh, right?
Yeah, but those guys are both.
You and I are asking is for them is to like just be authentic about it and stop trying to pump it up as something that it's really not. And like stop trying to throw stats in our face. And if you guys want to have that argument, have us on. I will give up one of my Friday nights, which are really important to me. I think it's weird that people watch crap for 2 hours on a Friday night, but I'll do it. You guys invite us on. We'll talk about whatever you want. You don't have to give me the questions ahead of time. I think the shift is happening, Bill. I think people are starting to wake up. I think that's part of why they slowed down. They're taking a breath. They're reevaluating. And I think the National is coming in a perfect moment in time for this. I'm actually super excited about it. With that, I'll stop and we can get to the National. That was the last of my notes.
Good grief. What's the time right now?
We're fine. What? These people are going to listen to us. We'll just tell them.
So here's before I get into my questions that I want to have for you, I want to make a bold prediction for the National. my prediction is this: there will be more economic value exchanged through trades
Yeah,
than dollars changing hands at the National.
I 100% agree with that.
And
I
I think
it's
it
huge
and
traffic
my
equity
gut
right
tells
now.
me that my gut tells me that the safe thing would be to say it's 50-50, but I think it could be as like high as 70-30 in that room. But I digress.
No, I 100% believe that. I don't believe any big deals are going down in cash. If they are, they're going super discounted at fire sale rates.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's not what I'm expecting. I've never seen that before, so that would be a weird phenomenon.
Yeah. So you mentioned before, that you've been to 10 or so of
This is
these.
going to be my 9th or 10th one.
Yeah. So I haven't gone yet. I want to go. I guess but this year is different for you because I think you were going primarily as kind of a
I
hobbyist
was a
collector slash
appreciator of
yeah
before, like, yeah, no, like my main goal in the past had been come home with one card that was meaningful to me.
yeah
And that was ever
yeah
evolving. You've seen
yeah. But
collect
I like that.
everything, so
I
you
like
never
that
know
though.
what's going to be right, like kind of right in my focus at the moment. But I always
Yeah,
wanted to come home with one card that was significant to me, and I met that objective every time, and
that's great.
exceeded it all but maybe one time. But I
So
always got home with one.
what's different about this year then, given that you're kind of into this full time?
So I'm not as big of a collector. I'm more of a investor business guy this year, just out of circumstance. And partly it's because I ticked off over the last, 5 years, a lot of big cards, right? Like I was always running around up there searching for an Eddie Plank T206. But then I hit one in an auction a couple years ago, and that kind of satisfied it. And I'm not well heeled enough to make a run at a Wagner unless it was like, I don't know, maybe my entire collection might give me the worst full card out there. I don't know. Like that even be close. I'm not even sure I could swing it. So just my list of big cards, like 14 Crackerjack Ty Cobb had always been on my list. So pick that up. A 14 Crackerjack Joe Jackson's a card I'd like. Um, I'm not sure now's the right time for me. So there's stuff that I'm after. Um, but I think this one will be different because I'm still kind of looking to deploy money to make money because I mean
Mm-hmm.
I got a mortgage and I got a kid
Yeah,
going to college. Like funds have become more important to me at this point in my life than it necessarily would have been, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
got it.
So that makes it different.
Mhm.
I'm not a player in as many things as I might have otherwise been.
What's the one thing that you think that you'll see this year that you won't see next year?
Um, I mean, I do expect there to be some things on sale. I mean, 'cause we're kind of already seeing that, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
seeing people trying to move stuff in front of the show for, you know, prices that are extremely competitive. Um, that's not a phenomenon I've seen in the past, and I don't think that lasts a year. So I don't think I just don't believe most people that if they need the money, they're not going to be able to hold on 12 months for that fire sale.
No.
And so I've been saying, I actually think at the moment on a lot of stuff, we're near the end here. I think that the National is going to kind of create a selling buying opportunity that I'm hopeful that the overall hobby can kind of swing back up from in some degree. I could end up being totally wrong, but that's my feeling at the moment. I think there's a lot of quality stuff that uh, this is going to be a decent time to pick it up. But you know, I I know you don't agree with that, so
I don't know. I no, I wouldn't say I wouldn't go that far. I guess I'd say that I think in order for that to be true, you've got to be you've got to use a lot of discretion as to what you're picking up and why you're picking it up.
yeah,
That's how I'd answer that. Which look, by the way,
quality matters.
to a certain extent, that's always right. But
Right?
I think
That's all I'm saying for you.
but I think but I think that like for some of the stuff that I know that you know well, and by that extension, you understand, condition sensitivity, pop counts, the historical relevance, all the rest of it, right? Like, I do think there could be some cases made where if you see a card that you haven't seen in a couple of years, or maybe you've seen but they've gone off at a big price,
Yeah, yeah,
I think there is something to be said that if prices continue to fall, you may not see it again,
yeah. And
right?
other people have been talking about that, right?
Yeah.
That Kobe jersey card we were talking about earlier.
Did you get it?
I did not get it. I was runner up, and it
What was the
went for
price?
less than half price of the last sale, which was a month ago.
I told you to bid 1,700.
Yeah, I know, and that might have been enough. I didn't bid that much. I bid 13.95, and I lost it at 14.20.
See,
It's somebody else's problem now, bro. I got $1,420 to go spend in Atlantic City next week.
just don't spend it on gamblers and other kind of crap.
No, and that I gave that suggestion. I'll give it again here. If you're going and you have card money and gambling money, you got to separate the stats. Don't
Impossible for people.
Not impossible. People should be able to do that. Don't mix the stacks, or you're going to find out you're going to be at zero and you're going to need to sell. And if you need to sell in a distressed situation, David and Bill are your guys. We will buy at 60% of 60% of the last comp. So just know there's a floor out there we're setting.
We will buy six. Yes, I agree.
You gotta have more
60% of
questions for
60.
me. What other question you got? I'm getting excited. I'm a couple days away from getting on a plane. I've been trying to temper my enthusiasm. Like I said, I've got a little bit of a different vent. I've got a different plan this time. A big part of my plan is actually $500 and under. I've talked to you about this before. I think that part of the hobby always it creates good risk reward opportunity because everybody in the hobby can pretty much afford cards in that range,
I
right?
agree.
And there's something in that range that's attractive to almost everybody out there. And if I can buy $125 to $150 eBay cards for $80, if I can stack that, that's what I want to do. If I can buy $700 cards for 500, I'm going to do that because even after my eBay fees, I'm still in the black. So that's really going to be my focus. Is a lot of stuff in that range. The smalls add up, and I've said a number of times, if you're trying to make a business out of this, it's tough to scale it. If you're only going to focus on 4 and 5 figure cards, the risk proposition for the investment side of that could be a lot worse than you think it is. Like that Kobe's a great example, right? I had a
Yeah.
$5,000 sale, then a $3,000 sale, and then tonight, but they were on a different platform, and then tonight on the big eyeball platform, it goes at 14 and a quarter, 14.20, and you're like, well, crap.
Yeah.
Those
I,
two
I, I
these sales probably weren't. They're not really
yeah.
real. They didn't get paid for. They didn't get reported as not paid for, so people don't know. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm scared to death of that stuff. But in the 100 to 500 range, I'm not too worried. You can get out of that even if you're wrong without getting crushed. And if you stack
Yeah. I think
up,
there's, yeah, I think that if it's kind of interesting, I think playing in that kind of discretionary income band, which I would characterize fairly similarly to like sub $2,000 card, but really more sub $500 or $600 card, I think is a good kind of play on what's happening. Because I think there are people that even despite the overhang of what's happening, like if they see something that they really want and it's $300 to $500, they're going to go and figure out how to pay for that,
yeah.
right?
And
Um,
like your multiple factor, right?
yeah.
Name a card right now that you're comfortable paying 5,000 for that'll triple in price, no matter what
But
happens.
but that's what I'm
So
saying.
hard
Like that's
to
why.
do. Maybe you can find $300-$400 items that are going to be $2,000 in a year. I think they're out there. They've been
Yeah.
overlooked, and
No, I
people
agree.
will discover them, and that's part of the knowledge process.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I know. I know. I listen. I think you're right. And I thank you for continuing to prove my point from earlier that you just disagreed with. The the what else was I going to say about that? Oh, about just the high end dealer point that you made, I think was right. I mean, I think um, I think there are some pretty notable people that you and I would be familiar with that kind of trade in that kind of high end category that um, panic's not yet setting in because they're just trading on these like just incredible gains. But I do think that, and this will be where I think the kind of post national commentary will be interesting, but I do think that the national will provide them kind of a litmus test for like the real direction of where things are going. Because I don't think outside of like some of the high end like vintage type stuff, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of cash in that room chasing after, $10,000 to $50,000 cards. I just don't believe it. I
Yeah.
just don't think that's right, particularly
We haven't
modern
seen
cards.
that. I mean, I've said the Dallas shows where in the past I'd seen that activity. It hadn't been there. And nobody's sharing pictures of it on social media. And I don't believe it's because they're hiding it.
No,
It's because it wasn't there. There were no pictures to be taken of $18,000 sitting on top of the case.
here's another question for you. What is something? Give me something. Give me a experience that you could observe that would provide high degrees of optimism for you, and what's an experience that you could observe that would provide um, a depressing level of cynicism around where things are going.
So, I mean, look on the optimism side. I'm actually hopeful that the dealers, and I mentioned this before, right? The majority of dealers are doing this as side hustle anyway, and this is how I try to act, and I think there are people out there that would back this up. Um, I think if the dealers will be receptive to trades at like reasonable values. So, if you're asking 100% for your card and you're trading somebody at 70%, it's not reasonable. 30% spreads, you're not an auction house. We've all been griping about it. Like, if that's your mode, my belief is you just ultimately you won't be here very long. There's so few people that can get away with that stuff. So, I'm hoping to see a lot of cards kind of changing hands in trades that people can sort of live with it at values that make sense.
Mhm.
Because I know I'm not going to see cash moving unless it's
Yeah.
fire sale stuff. Um, I'm sort of hopeful that there's a good degree of engagement between dealers and buyers or attendees, because there have been nationals in the past where there was sort of if you had a table, you had this air of superiority about you, and like for a guy like me, like I just keep walking, and that's to your detriment because I'm always walking around with a fair bit of money to spend on anything, on everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not in a single lane, and sometimes I'm sure people look at me and like, he's an idiot bum. Looks like, I mean, especially now, he looks like a like homeless hippie. Um, you just never know, but you never know. Um, in terms of the cynicism side, I mean, if we, and this could happen, I think if people kind of turn on themselves or there's just a ton of bitching about stuff, I mean, that will really make me sad. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I've been telling people, and you know, if you're an attendee, but in a weird way, even if you're a dealer, you have a table too. Um, it should be about fun, man. This should be like one of the most fun weeks of your year if you're into this stuff. Like you're gonna see crap here that you never see. Like I mean, the auction houses are going all out to show you cool stuff. I mean, I remember the last time I was at the National, which was what, 3 years ago now. They had previewed that like autographed rookie card collection. I don't know if you remember this thing, but I mean, it went from like T206 all the way up to current. Like, I Bill, it was insane. Like, if you threw out a name of anyone in the baseball world, like the card was signed. Like
Wow.
Cobbs and like T206 Cobbs, 33 Gowdy, uh, Bruce and Garrick's and T206 speakers and
That's cool.
39 play ball Ted Williams and I mean 52 Mantle autos. Like I mean everything was there. It was all there. If you named a name, it was basically there. Like I mean that's kid in a candy store stuff. Just to like
Yeah, that's cool.
set your eyes on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the auction houses go all out every year to kind of show you the best of it. The game use stuff that you see is going to be off the charts, incredible. Um, the 1 year we went to Chicago, I took my son, like, got a picture of him holding a Babe Ruth bat. I
That's
mean,
cool.
it's insanity, the stuff that you'll see there. So, like, I really hope people just kind of enjoy the moment, right? Enjoy the moment of it. Like, you've got to be able to separate yourself from the values and the financial situation and just appreciate it for what it is. I mean, it's a collection of sports memorabilia and cards that you only get to see once a year. So like,
Hmm.
don't miss that, guys. Like, if you miss it, I just think you're gonna regret it. And it's not gonna be fun. If it's not fun, don't do it. It's gotta be fun.
Yeah. I saw. I again. I just kind of.
Like I'm thinking about you as a crowd guy. You'd go nuts at one of these things.
Oh yeah. No.
You're
I
gonna
mean,
see
that's why I want to
cards
go.
that you're
Yeah.
like, now the prices will be outrageous, but you'll at least there are probably cards of his that you're sort of only incidentally aware of that you'll like find there. And
Yeah.
like you'll go nuts of like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So here's
I
what I'd
heard it
say. I
existed, but the unicorn's real. And now
yeah.
it's
No.
been
And
real. Now I got
that's
a
what be.
decision to make.
No. That's what would be exciting. I mean, I think that hopefully next year when I go. I mean, it's going to be a test of wills, but my plan would be to kind of be very kind of intentful about the cards that I'm looking for, and be okay if like I just come up empty because I'm looking for unicorns. I think that as I answer some of my own questions to you around like hopefulness and cynicism, I do think that there's probably likely that we'll see, you know, we'll see both those questions answered. It's kind of interesting. I have in the back of my mind that we're going to see like some just mega sale of something, and maybe
Yeah.
it's like pre-negotiated, pre-show or whatever. But like, there's going to be some card go down for millions. I think that's going to be the talk of the show. I also think on the reverse side of that coin, there are going to be a pretty high profile theft or two.
100% happens.
And I think there's going to
every
be,
year.
and I think there's going to be a pretty high profile like deal gone bad or two.
Yeah.
Where some maybe high, to your point, like where some kind of high profile people, get entangled in something where it devolves into a kind of he said, she said, and
I mean,
it
one
becomes
year in Cleveland, I think at 51 Bowman Mantle, like 5 or 6 just walked off. I mean, it was a big deal. But no, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's still enough people that are well heeled enough that something big could go down. And look, this could be a show where something we haven't really seen sort of surfaces for one of the auction houses. And
yeah.
and what sucks about that is like, and I'm already guilty of it. How was it staged?
Well, I mean, I think if anything,
No
like to
offense,
me,
Ken Golden, but if some crazy thing shows up,
no, like I don't think, like I think that, like to my point earlier, like I do think there's going to be some sort of like $1 million plus sale, something that happens. There's nothing about something like that that's going to be organic and authentic. It's all going to be choreographed and agreed upon ahead of time, and it'll be brought out to light as something that just kind of magically happened during the week or whatever. But I think it's going to be somewhat of a quasi publicity stunt.
yeah,
And maybe we'll know the buyer, but more likely we won't. And
right.
but anyway, well,
A big highlight of the week that I can already predict. Thursday morning, P. Ryan and I will be walking somewhere. We're looking at a couple routes, but we'll be walking, and we're gonna invite the hobby to walk with us. You fat, lazy people that need to get out there and walk with us. We're gonna do that.
that's fun.
The other thing, I am sitting on a horde of Darren Ravel and Gary V. Allen and Ginter cards. And I've basically made the decision. Darren already knows I have them of him. He's going to be there Wednesday and Thursday. Gary doesn't know I have these cards, but Gary said he's coming. I'm going to try to get to him and set up some sort of like charity giving thing where
Good.
I donate the cards, Gary donates the autographs. You guys show us your receipts from whatever charity we select, and you get a free card. And I'm gonna see if I can't get Nat to actually slab him at the show. So
I like it.
I'm gonna try that, but I decide I'm gonna do it on site instead of the social media thing ahead of time. Because I always think in person works better. And if they don't agree to it, we'll just blame them for. I'll be back on Sports Card Cowboys telling you that
Blaming them.
they don't care about helping other people. They only care about helping themselves. I'm not expecting that at all. I think when I roll up on Gary and be like, Gary, I got like 35 cards here. You know, I think this is an easy $15,000 donation event for people buying the cards. What if you matched it? What if Nat slabbed him and he matched it? You know, could we roll up $50,000 for mental health or whatever organization you guys are interested in? Could we put that together? Suicide prevention, anything, right? Like I'm open to that stuff, but that to me would be a great story from the show, and so that's something I'll work on.
I agree. I'm excited to see
That
how
might,
that
I
all
mean, that'll be
unfolds.
fun. It'll be that'll actually that has the potential to put a really good twist on the show for me personally. But I just think overall from a hobby perspective, like we don't talk a lot about that kind of stuff, and um, those two guys seem like two people who might be interested in it. So if you're watching out there, Cage Lawyer, you need to set that up with Gary for me. I'm gonna hit Cage up before I get
You
up
should.
there. So it could be fun. There could be some great content coming out of this, Bill. I'm gonna be running
I'm
around
excited, man. No,
like
I'm
cut the
excited
hair
for the.
so that I'd be nice and nice
I'm
and
excited for the post. I'm excited for
and
the.
titty subs. I'm coming for you, dude. You told me not to check my comps in the aisle. I'm checking them right in front of your booth. Everyone, the official comp station of the National is right in front of Titty Sub's booth. You should stand right in front of his cards, check all the comps you want. He may try to bump you with his belly, he says, but we're going to shut him down on Thursday at the National. No sales for Titty from 9 to 12 because that's the official comping station of the National.
I love it. Well, partner, I think we got another good show in the books.
The best one yet.
Agreed.
It's like the Colbert Show. Every time we come out, we're a little bit better.
That's right.
All right, people.
All right, man. Take care.
We will
Peace.
see you soon from Atlantic City. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.